I'm Yvonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of New Moon Counseling. But out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi everyone, welcome to Outside the Therapy Room. We are here today with Bethany.
Hello,
Welcome
I'm back.
To season 2.
Season 2, better than ever.
Oh yeah. Well, I feel like I say I'm happy. I'm just excited anytime that we have a guest on, and so I'm happy to have you back. You are my go-to person for all TV things and all reality TV, all of that stuff.
That's where I spend most of my time, so Perfect. Yeah, it makes sense.
But yes, I wanted to kind of have you here to explore true crime.
Mm-hmm.
There's such
spooky.
There's such a fascination with true crime, and before we started recording, I was telling you how that's not my jam. Like, don't really watch
too
or
scary.
Listen. It's too real. It freaks me out. I can't. But it is so interesting just to see how many people love it, how many people watch it to go to bed, or it's like the thing that they watch to kind of, unwind at the end of the day.
Decompress, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really kind of interesting. There's been so many Netflix documentaries around all of these serial killers. And again, a lot of fascination just with those like retelling of the story. Not to mention like podcasts, even TikTok. Yeah. There's like, an area of TikTok where people go for those kind of like
even like the storytelling element. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
So it's become like a cultural phenomenon. I'm curious about why it's so fascinating to so many people. So why do you think there's been so much love for true crime lately? Yeah,
I'm kind of thinking about this in a couple of ways, because there's like true crime and then there's like, mystery serial killer kind of movies, TV shows, that kind of thing. So there's kind of already a separation between what's true crime, I would say, and what's not. Yeah. But I think it's one of those things where we feel like it's answering questions for us, like what would happen if, or these kind of situations that we feel would never happen and they do. Plus this kind of, that mystery, like problem solving kind of mindset of it's a bit of a puzzle. How did it end up this way? So I really, am drawn, and a lot of people are drawn to these true crime kind of mysteries where you don't know who did it or how the case kind of ends up, but it's something that you find out throughout the thing, so you can almost kind of guess who did it, that kind of thing. So I think it's very easy to get invested in, because there's elements of, I wonder how this happened, or I wonder what would make someone do this, because it's so sometimes like out of our own world. I think we like to feel like we know stuff, and so it feels like I would know how to handle this situation if it happened to me. Right. The reality being that would be incredibly scary, terrifying, and you might not get to be prepared in a way.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I do think, like, for me, I love psychological thriller novels, and it's because of that kind of like whodunit storyline of like, how did this happen? Usually it starts off with like a murder or something weird has gone on in the beginning, and then you kind of learn about the characters and everything, and I do really enjoy it because I'm like, oh my god, it's this person, it's totally that person who did it, and then sometimes there's a big twist, and so that's kind of like exciting to hear. But I do really like the problem solving element of it, or like the kind of like mystery, who could it be, like all of those things. But I do agree with you. I think there's a curious component where we want to know everything, and we're very curious to understand the inner workings of somebody who is a serial killer, trying to understand that more, which maybe is what gravitates us towards these documentaries, where other people like psychiatrists or doctors, therapists, whatever, can sometimes give their opinion on what could have been happening to this person.
Yeah, I think it's so psychological. Like, I almost go to, did you see it was the Netflix documentary, it was called like Catfish or something like that, and can I spoil it?
Yeah, was it the one with the...
It was the one where it was the mom
yes.
who was actually sending like really terrible bullying, harassment messages to her own daughter. And I think from this psychological perspective, I do find that very intriguing. Like, what... And not from this like stark judgment of what would make a person do that, but like genuinely, what happened that would lead to something like that? Like, I almost put my mindset in what would it be like to be her therapist?
Yeah.
Which would be a challenging job, but it's the kind of intrigue that I think fits even our career. So it makes sense, I would say. There's probably some kind of correlation of, you know, therapists enjoy true crime. Yeah. But there's a huge psychological component. Like, I feel all my papers through university, if I could write them about like psychopathy or something like that, I would. And I actually don't have an answer for why, because I'm more of a reality TV person. It's not always true crime, like here and there it is, but there's something really intriguing about learning about how people can think so incredibly differently. And then it becomes this discourse of where we all, I think, try and watch the show as an expert, right? Like, and that's not from having like a psychology background. That's everyone who's watching true crime or watching, you know, court cases or, you know, like the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case that was like so readily available. And well, I think that was civil. I don't know if that was actually crime.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't actually remember. But,
no, but
it's something about having this public opinion and this public discourse of how do we feel about something that has gone on. It starts a lot of conversations. Like, me and my boyfriend, when we watch these shows together, we're always talking about, well, I don't think that ruling was fair, or I can't believe they let him off that easy. You know, like, it becomes such a conversation piece. And I do think that it does draw us in, as opposed to like a very kind of fictionalized TV show where I can't get into it.
Yeah. But I think you touched on some things there where, like, as viewers, we can create these very strong opinions towards or against something, which can then create, like, you know, intriguing conversations depending on who you're talking to, or like heated discussions or arguments based on this thing that isn't even anywhere close to us. But I think that, again, even just that on its own can add a lot of curiosity. Yeah. Do we feel, you know, more pulled towards somebody because there's like something there? So I think from like a therapeutic perspective, like, that is really interesting.
Like a human involvement. See. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. But I do think, like, we always want to know, especially like, and now we're going into just like legal cases, but I think with like the Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, we wanted to know about their lives, right? Like, we wanted to have an understanding as to what was going on. And a lot of the things that came up in their case was also public, like, years ago. And so we were able to kind of have the pictures from that time and then draw like our own kind of conclusion to what was actually happening
100%.
there.
And I think that connects to crime too. It's when you watch these documentaries, you might get a broad picture of the crime, right? But what's really intriguing about the documentary is what happens behind closed doors, right? What led to this was probably, you know, especially with a lot of murder, is a lot of history of abuse. The things that are like so hidden in a way, like, we want to see constantly what's happening behind closed doors. And I think especially with the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial, it was, you know, video footage and conversation of what's happening behind closed doors for people that we know as celebrities, which then creates these really intense parasocial relationships where we think we know someone, or we think we have all the information because we got a glimpse behind the door. Yeah. You know, and yet there's still so much that we would never be able to know. Yeah.
Yeah, so the curious place I can definitely understand where like coming from a place of curiosity, you can kind of get really attached to true crime. But something else that you mentioned was like the fear management. So like watching something and being like, oh, I could do it differently, or I'm going to be prepared because this is how that person got abducted. So now I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to have these tools. I'm going to have all of that. And it's a way that we kind of trick ourselves to being prepared for situations. And sometimes it can calm our anxiety down. But I think other times it can just add to our anxiety, because then we're always like hyper aware of like what
100%. And I think there's a bit of a balance, because I will say there comes out a lot of education behind these things. Like I remember my mom had told me a story of, she used to work downtown Toronto, and it was around the time where who was it, Paul Bernardo, is that him? He was kind of out and about, and my mom had, I should ask her if I can tell the story. She's probably fine. She had someone drive up to her and said, oh, my dad told, your dad told me to pick you up from work. And she hopped in the car, and it was fine. He actually ended up being someone that her dad did know. She got a ride home. Everything was fine. But to me, I am shook by that story. Yeah. Like, you do not get in a car with someone that you don't know. And I think so much of the learning that we have of what you do and don't do, especially I would say with women feeling really anxious or worried about walking outside alone in the dark with headphones on, something like that. Like, it is something where we actually have had to adapt to being really cautious because of these scary things that have happened. So from one lens, you know, there's a lot of very real things that we can take on from the discourse, take on from like, what are the signs of abuse, right? Or what are things that you can do to keep yourself safe from really dangerous kind of stranger interactions, right? And yet I think it gives us a bit of a false sense of preparedness, because it can get quite quick into almost like a victim blaming mindset, right? That had she known better, had she done differently, almost into had she not drank that night, right? We get very quickly into this mindset that this could have been prevented by the victim or the person that was harmed adjusting their behavior. I don't think that's fair, because realistically, there's some scary things that happen. There's some scary people out there. There's people that are going to do bad things that a certain preparedness is not going to help us from. So that's kind of the mindset where we get a little stuck with this. Are we feeding our anxiety? Are we using known information to kind of prepare ourselves a little bit better before getting into, and if these things happen, if crimes are committed, which they are committed constantly, is it our fault for not being prepared? Right. I don't like that. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a very slippery slope where I don't actually have a full answer, but I do think there's a certain element of this fear management of, you know, my boyfriend and I were just watching the one of, I forgot her name. I think her name was Amy, but it was on this cruise, and she went missing. Okay, cruise with thousands of people where they're going to keep the cruise going no matter what's happening. I have never been on a cruise. Would not go anywhere alone on a cruise now. Right. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think I'm operating out of my anxiety.
I also won't go on a cruise, but for very different reasons.
I don't think there's a lot of scary documentaries about cruises.
There are.
I don't think I'm not a cruise person. I think that's fair. I like land. I don't know if I would get nauseous. Like,
there's so many other components.
There's other reasons why I maybe wouldn't go on a cruise, but there's these little bits and pieces of like, okay, that freaks me out. Yeah. Like, I think that's a real fear of mine, or it's something I would be able to manage. Okay, you don't leave the room by yourself if you don't feel comfortable or it's late at night, whatever it means, right? So
But I had that too, like growing up, like even my dad and like even now my husband is like, if your car breaks down on the highway and it's night, call me to pick you up and we will come back in the morning. Don't get out of the car. Don't get out of the car.
Lock the doors.
For help. Like lock the doors. And
I've been told the same thing.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, maybe that's something that's told just to women. And that again is valid for a variety of reasons. Again, there's a lot of like true crime podcasts. And like true crime media that talks a lot about, you know, women getting abducted because they had car troubles and somebody very kind came to help them and then they ended up getting killed. Didn't that happen to like Ted Bundy's? Wasn't that one of his things?
Opposite. So sometimes it wouldn't be that the woman needed help, but it would be that Ted Bundy would say, I need help.
But that's something that my parents also said, like, don't stop for anybody.
Don't stop.
And then, but it brings up a lot of the, like, but I want to be helpful. I want to do all of these things, but there's a risk.
But that's exactly it.
Killed.
Right? And I think that's where we get a little stuck because we can be easily freaked out to the point of we become people that would not willingly help people because we're so scared of these stories, right? There's a lot of like human trafficking stories surrounding helping people. And yet, if you think of how many times have you been in a mall and someone said, hey, do you know where the store is? Or I was just walking back through exhibition the other day and this woman was having a really hard time finding the train station. So I walked with her, right? And there's these situations happen so often where we suddenly jump to help someone, and I would never have thought anything of it, right? And I think that's where we get stuck because it oftentimes is something you do without thinking and yet has these potential major consequences, right? The women that stopped to help Ted Bundy, major consequences, and yet she wasn't thinking something terrible could happen, and that's not on her.
Right.
For not thinking, because we help people all the time.
All the time, yeah. It's the same thing like with kids. Well, like a little similar. But with kids, like don't talk to strangers. But then they don't even talk to like our neighbor. Our neighbor will say hi. Like kids might be like, oh my God.
Yeah, finding that line. Yeah.
So it can definitely be challenging. I think, again, when we're watching these things, our survival instinct might come up. Yeah. We might think that we will do things very differently. It also maybe helps us understand danger, but in a way that isn't always going to be helpful for us, but still something real that we might have in the back of our heads just to kind of like be cautious. How do you think media storytelling plays a role in making us feel emotionally invested?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a couple things. First of all, media storytelling will always be on the side of look at this 1 in a million thing that happened. It could happen to you. Right. And there's so many flaws with that kind of statement, right? If we were talking about anxiety, we would talk about how many times does this not happen, right? You're going to see the news report. You're going to hear the TikTok of woman alone in her house was abducted. Right. Where's the news story? Woman alone in her house locked the door, had a glass of wine and went to bed. Like, where's that story? Right. And yet that story is happening so many more times, millions more times than these terrible crimes that are happening, right? They're so very infrequent and yet they're all we hear about. Yeah. So I think it has a strong effect, especially with TikTok. Like, it's so readily available that sometimes we can see really jarring, really gruesome things. There was the video circulating of Charlie Kirk, who got shot in the head. There's going to be a disclaimer on this episode, It's a bit intense. And that video was just on. Yeah. I saw it scrolling on TikTok. It was terrible. It's so available. I think that's a big problem is sometimes it's not the curiosity that feels kind of safe and exploratory, but these things of like, I wish I didn't see that. Yeah. Right. And so I think media,
and you don't go seeking it. Sometimes it just pops up
sometimes
and, like, oh,
and that's why I think it's so hard with something like TikTok, because you're not seeking it, but you are, because you're on that app. Right. You're going to see what's coming up, what's popular. You're going to see things that result in such and such a company getting more money. So it's really biased in the direction of shock value or things that are so rare, but we're told by the media that they're not so rare, or even vice versa, that these things don't happen and then they do, right? I think that's something that's really validating about true crime sometimes is, you know, we might be told that's not something that ever happens, right? Like a lot of sexual abuse, I'll say, comes from this narrative that it doesn't just happen. So sometimes having that true crime documentary that says it did happen and it was huge and it was terrible, or it was in the public eye and we had no idea, right? Like, it can be validating, but I'm always a little bit suspicious of what is the media or the company gaining from having this material out in the world. Is it for views and shock value, ad revenue? Like, you know, there's so many extra components there where sometimes we see things that I don't know that we need to see.
I agree with you. And I think even for like true crime podcasts that are maybe highlighting a crime that happened long ago, the way that they're telling it is in a form of storytelling. And so we can, just like we do with reading in movies and anything, we can kind of form an attachment to a quote unquote character. Obviously with true crime, like podcast, media, whatever, it's a real person and this crime really did happen, but we can be emotionally invested in the story because we are invested in the characters. But I think, like you said, there's a whole bunch of factors that are being put in there, like marketing and, you know, money, all of these things, or shock value, all of these things that are kind of like intertwined in the storytelling to kind of have us like wanting to watch the next episode or to listen to the next episode, whatever it could be. And so this emotional connection that we end up building to it can be so complex because it can be all of their things are working and they kind of got us and now we're hooked. Or it can also be that we've kind of developed this emotional connection to somebody in the storytelling portion. And I think, and while you were talking, I was thinking about like the TV show Criminal Minds. That was huge because we wanted to get into the minds of criminals and understand exactly what is going on in their mind. What kind of caused a person to just switch and then go off and murder people, right? Or like do these really, really gruesome, awful things to people. And like they're still humans. They're our species, right? Like we're so curious and like wanting to understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think they're like, you're really kind of naming this like really intense push-pull, right? Yeah. It's like the, you know, the kind of analogy of like watching a car crash. Right. We probably don't overtly want to see those things. But the whole other side of traffic is slowing down for a reason. Right? It's slowing down for this curiosity of the 2 seconds that we each get to look over and see what happened. And I do it, and I know I do it. And, you know, I've even had conversations about that. It's like, well, everybody's doing it. We're going to have to look. I can't drive past it and not look. And yet I might see something really terrifying, really scary. I might be affecting my own ability to focus on the road, right? Like there's so many things at play where we're drawn into it, but we almost feel this like intense, like, but should I be? Right. Or we start to question like, why would I be into that? Right? Like if people are really, really into true crime, like is there questioning of like, there's something to be said about how this seems to relax me. Like what is going on there, right? So there's this intrigue, and yet it maybe does kind of border on this a little bit of like a moral kind of stance of like, what does it actually mean to be intrigued by something that can be shocking and gross and scary and
like gory,
inhuman and yet human, right? 100%.
And I think that's definitely been a thing that I've heard from other people where they're like, you know, people, you know, I mean, what I've heard was women are falling asleep to these true crimes, or they put on a true crime show when they're home alone as like a thing to decompress, to calm down, to calm their nervous system. What does that mean about them? Are they like quote unquote psychopaths? Like what's happening? And I'm like, well, Yeah, I mean, it could be something curious to explore, to kind of say like exactly what about this story soothes you. But as we've already pointed out, there's so many factors of it, right? People can get soothed by just like feeling like, okay, this is going to help me prepare. This is going to help me whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it brings us into our next topic where it's like the mental health effect.
Mm,
and so, you know, because we are therapists, even though we're talking about being
outside of the therapy room.
I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on what are some potential positive psychological effects of true crime interest.
Positive psychological effects. That's a really fun question. Positive. Well, maybe it's a bit of like a realism thing. Maybe it's being able to balance that scary things happen. Yeah. I think the positive effect is maybe some of that element of that preparedness. But when we're thinking about people that fall asleep to true crime, I automatically go, okay, I want to talk because I feel soothed by the ladies of Beverly Hills like screaming at a dinner table.
Yeah.
It's stimulation in a way that does not reflect what my day looked like. So it's relaxing, right? So I think especially like a true crime documentary I go to, like sometimes it's really soothing. Sometimes it's an expert speaking and it's boring. Yeah. There's some elements of I can understand why it would be calming. So maybe the mindset is keeping it really, really general. Is it something that takes you outside of your day? Are you not sitting and stewing about your work day? You're sitting and stewing about some terrible crime, and yet your mind is in a different space. And so maybe that feels relaxing.
I mean, to add to that, it's also like a sense of gratitude. Like this happened to somebody, but not to me. And I know I'm safe and I'm okay.
Right. Like and that separation of, you know, even that kind of image of like sitting inside your house and feeling really cozy and warm and watching something scary to say, oh, wow, I'm glad that that's not me. Yeah. I think maybe in that way it's a bit grounding. It kind of is exposing us to things that do happen and yet a reminder that it's not happening to us right now. And I think that that reminder can be really soothing or grounding, or to be blatantly honest, this person in this documentary is having a way worse day than I am. Yeah. So my bad day is okay. Yeah. Right? Maybe it's about being able to kind of sit and feel comfort in knowing that your life looks different than someone who's going through something really terrible.
Yeah, for sure. So I think to add to that too, it's like feeling informed. Like I am informed. Now I know that can add a little bit to the preparedness. Yeah. And maybe within that, it also allows us to understand human behavior. Because like again, in some of these we're getting, you know, input from other people in their lives, other people, you know, like professionals talking about the makeup of this person who did all of these horrible things. So we get to understand a little bit of that human behavior. And something we've brought up already is that there's so much community bonding that can happen from some of these cases, right? Like you said, you and your partner are able to talk a little bit about it. Yeah. You guys have like...
share our opinions and
And you guys have like a shared interest in it. It can be, you know, if you have friends or a partner who also really is into true crime, you're building a community out of that. And so those I would say are some of like the positive psychological effects. Would you add anything else to it that we haven't?
No, I feel like that covered a lot for me. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, now switching gears over to the negative impacts.
We have to say that one too.
To say it. What are the negative impacts of consuming too much true crime?
So I think we kind of touched on that anxiety piece, right? Making us feel like these are things that happen every single day, could happen to us, could happen with a simple mistake. Yeah, it could really induce a fear mindset. I mean, you said it yourself earlier.
I can't watch that.
You watch it and then now it's like, did we lock the door? Did we, you know, it creates this kind of paranoia. Yeah. And I think, you know, little bits and pieces of that are kind of a normal human experience, and yet let's think about when we choose to induce it ourselves, right? It's a discomfort, it is a shock value, right? It's these kinds of clips or shows where we do kind of want to look away. And I think that can lead to, sometimes it can lead to like difficulty sleeping, some really bad dreams, feeling anxious in situations where you didn't feel anxious, like driving a car,
or walking
being out
at
night. Yeah. I think it's the negative impact would more so look like, what does this look like for you when you're not watching it? Does it really, really linger? There's nothing wrong with kind of thinking about it, because it might have been really thought-provoking. And yet, is it impacting or changing your behavior in the day-to-day, not allowing you to kind of know that while these things do happen, are we acknowledging how rare they are? Are we acknowledging how our life is different as much as we're acknowledging how much our life is the same? Right? So I think it's kind of like this really, like, it can put your head in a little bit of a cloud of, if this is reality, then this is my reality. And that's where it can get a little blurry.
I think that's a common thing for consuming any sort of media, even like with the reality shows. People can sometimes get a little bit too much, where then they, like, the boundary between their lives and like the people on the reality shows' lives end up kind of blending together.
100%,
But I would say, like, definitely catastrophizing and like thinking worst case scenarios. So now you become like hyper vigilant of everybody around you, and now you're like maybe profiling people and saying like, that guy looks like a creep, like, you know, you can't do this to me. And then, there's like this level of mistrust now that we have to just humanity in general, where it can create this, like, again, hypervigilance, and then it can go into like unhelpful behaviors like isolation, you know, just constantly being in fear, and your body ends up not being in the best place. And so you touched on some of those things about, like, you know, recognizing how has your behavior kind of shifted or changed when you're not watching. And I would say those are things to look at, just to have an understanding or an awareness of when maybe consuming true crime is going into an unhealthy territory. Like sleep, how long is that lasting? I think I mentioned to you before we were recording that Ted Bundy movie with Zac Efron, and I think it was Lily Collins. We watched it, me and my husband, and then we went to bed, and I'm like, oh my god, did you lock the door? What was that sound? What was this? But it lasted that night, and then I slept great. Everything else was fine. So like those like small moments, like you said, it's just a normal human behavior, human reaction to something. But if that ends up lasting a very long time, or, you know, continuous days, then maybe that's a place to look at, okay, this is maybe getting into an unhealthy territory and needing to take a step back from consuming so much true crime. Is there anything 100%. Else you would add in terms of like things to look out for?
No, I think you kind of named it with, it's almost like that fight or flight instinct is coming in, and it naturally takes a second to kind of go away. But there is something to be said about like the psychological effects of constantly being in fight or flight. I think too, like, I would wonder if people are watching true crime a lot and yet experiencing a lot of the negative mental health effects from watching it. You wonder from that kind of psychological standpoint of, what are we doing to ourselves? How are we treating ourselves? What are we choosing to do in our downtime? And is it the thing that is healthy for us? And if it's not, what are we trying to get out of it instead? Right? So I would have, you know, back inside the therapy room and have a lot of questions about, it seems to be affecting you negatively, and yet it's your go-to. What's happening there?
Yeah,
right?
And I mean, those are even great questions to reflect. Like, if a person is really feeling like that, then reflect on it. Like, is this actually helping you? Is this, like, why? Like, the curious why of it all.
Yeah, 100%.
How do you think trauma history influences how someone responds to true crime content?
Ooh, interesting. When I think about trauma history, I think about familiarity. I think about seeking out things that feel sometimes more familiar than they feel soothing. So when I think about kind of a trauma history, it's maybe sometimes seeing an extreme end of things. Oh, I'm having a hard time with this question. Trauma history.
Like, do we think that maybe people who have a traumatic background maybe enjoy watching or consuming true crime because it feels like that sense of familiarity?
I wondered that. I think that's something that's possible, right? That it feels maybe even the experience of, okay, I'm not alone in this, or this is what happens when this is taken to the nth degree. I wonder if it's a certain level of stimulation that you're used to. I wonder if it almost also feels soothing and healthy to our mind. Let's say if we've gone from a very traumatic past to a very secure present. My nervous system might want the reminders of the scary to further reinforce that things are okay now. Right? That we find that kind of balance or understanding of being able to notice the difference, right? It's like you don't really know a perfect sunny day unless you've seen a really rainy day, right? So being able to kind of
draw comparisons,
help ourselves draw comparisons, maybe it's grounding. For people that have experienced a lot of trauma and therefore have experienced a heightened level of anxiety, sometimes it can be soothing to experience that level of anxiety to remind us that we're paying attention, or to remind us that we would have the ability to manage this, or I don't know.
I'm also curious if like it also feels like, you know, now that person is in control. If they're consuming this and something starts getting really uncomfortable, they're in control. They can pause. They can take their headphones off. They can turn the TV off. Like, there's a lot more control that maybe wasn't there in their traumatic experience. Not to mention also, like you said, like drawing those comparisons, but we're doing that in a safe environment, right? Like we are not actually the ones that are being attacked or hurt or injured in any way. We're listening to how something happened to somebody else. And so like that perspective that we talked about before, where like we can kind of meet it with gratitude of like, oh, this didn't happen to me. It can also be like, oh, like some aspects of this happened to me, but I'm still okay now. Like it didn't end the way that it did for this person.
Or being able to draw comparisons to the consequences of the people that have caused the harm, right? I think that's a big part of a lot of kind of documentaries that we watch is especially having like the victim or the victim's family speaking towards expecting a certain justice system reaction. And I think that for many who exist in a space where sometimes they can't talk about things that have happened, they feel that things that have happened to them are so long ago. And we're talking about like big trauma, you know, like we kind of say capital T trauma as opposed to little t trauma. Being able to see people that had quote unquote justice served, the people that feel that their perpetrator was met with a reaction that maybe they wish that they had, or kind of having that, again, that like parasocial relationship of I'm not alone in this. These things happen to people, and if not for me, then for other people there's an importance of this information being out there. But that's a little bit more of an extreme kind of understanding of it.
Yeah, but I mean, it like that definitely, I mean, we're talking right now with, you know, we don't actually have an actual person that we're talking about who's experienced trauma, and we're going from their perspective. This is very general, and our thoughts on how, like, you know, individuals who've maybe experienced trauma may consume the true crime stuff. And I think, like, on the other spectrum of that, they just might not want to engage in true crime at all because of the triggers and the
that's what I wonder too, is there another side of this where there's something to be said about having kind of a security of being able to watch it and saying, this is so different from my life. Yeah. Whereas if someone who's experienced major trauma, they might not have that level of separation or that ability to say, oh, this barely happens, because maybe it happened to them, in which case I would wonder if they're actually less likely to watch it. Yeah. Because it's not the kind of the freaked out of, like, let's say a roller coaster or like a haunted house, right? That's like an adrenaline rush kind of scared, or kind of puts us on the edge of what we think is survival, and then we get the immediate soothing of the ride goes down, we exit the haunted house, and yet for people who've experienced trauma, they don't get off the ride, or they don't get to leave the haunted house. That's their everyday. So are they less likely to want to expose themselves to it? I would wonder that too. Does it go the other way, where it would be too real? It would feel too jarring.
Yeah, why put themselves through something like that?
Right. The difference between kind of a perceived survival instinct versus an actual survival reaction, right? That they would be a bit different.
Yeah, there are some places where people talk about how watching true crime for women can feel really empowering. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about how there seems to be a large audience of women that watch true crime, and my mind goes to, there's also a lot of true crime that's about harm to women. So I think some of it is that preparedness. I think some of it is that kind of perceived justice being served. But I think as women, it is empowering to see people that were able to step forward, people that were able to talk about the harm that had been done to them. I think of, there's been a few documentaries, I forget what it's called. It might be Athlete A or something like that, but it was about Larry Nassar and the USA Gymnastics team. And he had been assaulting these girls as their physiotherapist for years and years and years. And these girls were taught that this is physio, that this is supposed to help you, that it would be inappropriate to fight against someone who has so much power. And so I think it was really empowering as a woman to watch that documentary and have so many of these women and girls kind of say, something is wrong with this. I have a gut feeling that this should not be happening, that this does not feel like treatment, that I'm leaving feeling violated or scared, or I'm crying, screaming with the thought of having to go back to his office, right? That there's something to be said about how women have had to kind of go against the grain, stand against people who have a high amount of power and by nature trust, right? A medical professional, and say, no, this is not okay. And I think that shows a lot of women that you can stand against these things and you will feel terrified or unpopular, or you might be invalidated. And yet people do this. Sometimes justice is served, sometimes it's not. And I think there's something to be said about that thought of what does this look like for people that have followed it through and said, absolutely not, this is not okay. Right?
Yeah, like voice is power. If we hear that somebody's done something that can give us the empowerment to speak up about something that's happened to us, it can kind of allow us to feel like we're not alone. It can be a very powerful thing. And so if, women are seeing that portrayed in true crime or in legal cases, then there is that sense of empowerment that they can receive from it. And maybe change their behavior, the course of how they kind of handle certain situations that they're experiencing. Yeah. I wanted to kind of bring attention to your thoughts on TikTok detective culture, and like kind of amateur, like detectives, because especially in things that happen in real time.
Yep.
There's, like you said, cameras, phones everywhere capturing this, and then comments where a lot of people might share like, oh, this person did it, or did you see this? And there can be this amateur detective culture that's happening on social media. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this trend?
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't read the comments. I do. I do find this kind of intriguing, and I think that there's been, I think of instances where we see so much more in like the kind of the US social justice system, and we have it here too, but I think their court cases and that kind of thing are a little bit more open. And so I think the matter of this public opinion is one thing, but it's also this kind of detective work of seeing the little bits and pieces. The thing that I think of is how much social media actually helped the Gabby Petito case. How so it was Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. They were the ones, they were sharing an RV, and he murdered her. But they needed to put a case together of the proof. And what they found a lot of proof in was text messages, Instagram posts, TikTok posts. And I think a lot of that came from, because I remember actually being on social media at the time, that there was a lot more speculation of something going wrong, maybe even before the police were involved. That this social media, I think, moves very quickly and therefore can move really fast before we know that the justice system has kind of paid attention. I think too, it can be the reason that the social justice system pays more attention or adjusts how they're looking, right? That there's some positive influence of like, this is a big deal, do something about it, or here's actual like proof and evidence that could be used in a court case is a YouTube video, right? And that video having really, really high views, having a lot of comments of, wait, did you see when, at 3 minutes and 42 seconds when this happened, right? That there can actually be a lot where there's help. There's been, I forget the guy's name. It was a Canadian case of, it was terrible. But the Netflix series was called Don't F with Cats. Hunting an Internet Killer. And it was a Netflix documentary that kind of put together that in many ways, I think the police or detectives on the case had lost hope or lost interest in investing, didn't have enough evidence, because they have to operate in a different way. And because the perpetrator, the offender in this instance, had actually harmed cats, it was terrifying. Don't watch it. If you love cats, I'll be so honest. But it created, I think, like a Facebook outroar of this woman who was very impacted and upset that she actually became someone that was finding the little bits and pieces that kind of helped the case move forward with the police. So I think there's moments here and there where we feel like we have an effect on the justice system. I think it's risky though. I think it goes too far. I think there's a lot of things that we don't know, and I think it can lead to a bit of a skewed sense of how things work or what happens next, or being able to understand like the cancel culture mindset isn't always how we have to operate in the legal system. What are your thoughts?
No, my thoughts is like kind of what you said. For some cases, it can be an aid to the police department and, those that are actually, law enforcement that's actually trying to put a case together. And on another end, it can be all-consuming for the person that's looking for all of this, where then it can end up getting to an unhealthy place where they're so consumed by this case that has nothing to do with them, that they are not engaging in their own self-care or connecting with their own family, or it's all they talk about with people in their lives, which then can obviously cause, like, you know, separation and isolation and all of that. And so, yes, obviously, in some cases, it can be very helpful and justice can be served because of all of the cameras and all of the eyes that are seeing stuff 100%. That is on social media. And it can be unhealthy for that particular person.
Leading to this very kind of all-consuming over-involvement.
Or taking matters into your own hands.
Like doing dangerous things or unlawful things. 100%. Yeah.
Well, this was such an eye-opening and really fun conversation. I will say just some highlights for folks, you know, who are consuming true crime. Just pay attention to your anxiety and your nervous system. If there's high anxiety or, you know, your nervous system is really working overtime because you're, you know, consuming too much of this, and maybe it's time for a break. Time to put on a Disney movie, something else.
Something light and bright. Turn all the lights on.
Exactly. And also choose contact with respect and just trauma-informed. So if you are going into social media to certain pages that talk about true crime, just again, be mindful of what their content is focused on, and then limit exposure because it can become intrusive or triggering for sure. And then there's obviously, we mentioned some grounding activities and some soothing content. Like for me, it's a Disney movie or a comedy, anything that's just kind of gonna bring you back down. But thank you so much, Bethany. I think it's just so fun to kind of talk a little bit about true crime, how it's fascinating us, and, you know, balancing awareness and everything with it too. But
thank you. Always a pleasure.
Of course. Well, make sure that you follow us on Outside the Therapy Room Pod. Next week, we will be talking to a children's therapist about parenting and the overwhelming things that parents can kind of be experiencing around the holidays. So if you're a parent or you know a parent, make sure that you tune into that one, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.